Today's video is brought to us by the generosity of Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners. You win the fight, and they will help you win the fight after the fight for the rest of your life. There's a link in the description for a coupon code for a discount for all active self-protection watchers. I have a fascinating one today with Mark. Mark, this is a topic that I think that isn't well understood in legal circles. And we hear invoke your rights. Okay, so if you're in a defensive shooting and responding officers come, they secure the scene, and then they say, what happened? And of course we say, listen, you want to say as little as possible, and you want to invoke your right to have an attorney present during questioning, because what you say is absolutely can and will be used against you in a court of law. But it's not as simple as just saying, I'd like to speak to my attorney.
Yeah, the rules in this area have evolved in somewhat of a complex way, and I think it's helpful for people to understand what are the rules of this game, right? Like, for example, people will come in my office all the time and say, hey, Mark, they never read me Miranda. My whole case is going to be dismissed. And, the rules on Miranda, I think you could sort of simplify down and say, look, the only time the officer's got to tell you about your Miranda warnings is if two things are happening at the same time. Number one, you're under arrest. And number two, they're interrogating you. And so you got to break both of those things down, because you might be detained, but you're not under arrest. There's an important difference between those two. So if you're detained and you're not yet under arrest, or you're not even detained, say it's a voluntary interaction. Cop can just come up to you and say, hey, how's it going? How you doing? They can start talking to you. So either of those conditions, they don't have to read you Miranda. They can just start interrogating you and asking you questions. That there's no Miranda there is not a problem. The other thing is, if you are arrested, but they're not going to interrogate you, what is an interrogation? Then there's no Miranda required. There's lots of nuanced cases about what's an interrogation. So, for example, routine booking questions like we were talking about, where were you born, where do you live now, those type, what's your age, date of birth, that kind of stuff. Those are going to be seen as routine booking questions. They do not have to read you Miranda. The other thing is things that police officers do that are reasonably calculated to get you talking, that could actually be considered interrogation.
Okay.
So if the cop sort of guilts the defendant into it, the defendant says, look, I want my lawyer present. And then the cops start maybe either talking amongst themselves or talking to the defendant, and they say, hey, you should really think, it'd be nice to know where that firearm is. What if a little kid got a hold of that gun and shot and killed somebody? How would you feel if that happened? I mean, they could say these types of things, and to get the defendant to sort of blurt out statements, that can be seen and usually would be seen as an interrogation. So, and then also the question of how do you invoke? The issue is here, the law has evolved in a way. I think this is unfortunate because we're trying to get to the truth and we're trying to get the right answers, but there's been a very strong skew, in my opinion, to the law enforcement side. And this isn't a matter of pro-law enforcement or anti-law enforcement. This is a question of we're trying to set up the system in such a way
to find the truth.
We want the truth. If you're really not guilty, or say you're really innocent, we want you out of the system. If you're truly guilty of the crime, we want you convicted. So it's not a matter of we want to always be pro-law enforcement. Nope. We want to be pro the right rules to get the right answers.
Pro-justice.
And in this case, when somebody says, I think I need my lawyer present, that's not going to be good enough because the courts have really very strictly construed that invocation of your right to remain silent or right to an attorney. If you're squishy at all about it, if you say anything like, I think I'm going to need a lawyer, or what do you think, or do I need a lawyer, just because you mention the word lawyer or attorney, that isn't good enough. You've got to be decisive. You've got to be unequivocal in your invocation. And the reason that that's important is because if you've been arrested and you now are invoking your right, you say, look, I'm going to remain silent, I want my lawyer present. The rules are that the police have to stop questioning you at that point. They can do the routine booking questions, but they can't ask you questions about what happened. And that can be important, right? Because you're going to be dragged into the police department and put in the jail, and they own you for a while. Even in Arizona, you get to see a judge in 24 hours, but that's 24 hours for them to play around with you. And so we're trying to get the rule right so the cops don't work on you and work on you and work on you to get you to make what would be a confession or even a statement. So the rule is you invoke, and you should invoke in a way that's very clear. A lot of people worry about that, well, if I invoke, I'm going to look guilty. And I always try to explain to them, the rules of the game are such that you shouldn't worry about that.
Right.
Because that's not something that a prosecutor gets to use either as evidence for probable cause. It's not a reason a cop gets to arrest you. It's not a reason a prosecutor gets to charge you. And it's not something a jury ever gets to hear about.
Just like invoking your Fifth Amendment, right? So you can't be used against you.
And it can't be used against you even to allow the people on the jury to infer. The argument they want to make is, look, if the guy really is innocent, he would have answered the cop and said, when the cop said what happened, he would have said, here's what happened. Instead, what did he say? He said, I want my lawyer. We don't allow that.
Right.
That doesn't happen in American courts. And the reason for that is we don't want to let the jury even infer anything negative about the fact that you invoked your right, so they don't get to hear about it. I think that's very important. Even at trial, you have a right to not testify. And if a defendant invokes that right, then what happens is the jury gets instructed, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant has a constitutional right not to testify, and we're just basically letting you know you are not to draw anything negative from the fact that the defendant chose not to testify.
So when you invoke, you say, okay, wait a minute, something's gone on here, and the police come, you have to be definite. It's, I do not want to answer any questions without my attorney present. I will not answer questions.
Right, and I think it's important to note here, there's a way to invoke without being a jerk, right?
There's a shocker.
And just a further shocker, most police officers don't appreciate being treated like that.
What, they're people?
And they have a lot of discretion. And some of their discretion is to book you into jail and have you spend the night, or to cite and release you, or to put the cuffs extra tight or not. There are lots of things they have choices on. And so there's a way to invoke in a very nice way where you can say, look, I'm friends with an attorney. You can use my name. I'm friends with Mark Victor, and Mark advised me that I should never make any statements unless he's available and he's here. And I'd love to talk to you, but I really want Mark present, so can I call him right now? Real nice. And you know, the vast majority of police officers understand and respect that. That's exactly what they're taught to do, and it's what they teach their kids to do if they ever get arrested. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not lying to the police.
Right.
You're not doing anything wrong. You're simply asserting the very important constitutional rights that the founders of our nation fought very hard to have included. This is what keeps a tyrannical police state off your back, right?
Is having the system in place.
Well, it's some of the things that we try to do to have a free country.
Yeah. Do you think that most of the time you're going to get to call your attorney at the scene like that, like using your mobile?
Well, under the federal Constitution, this is for sort of the national people, they don't have to actually let you talk to an attorney right then and there. They have to stop asking you questions. When you say, I want my attorney present before I answer any questions, that just means they stop questioning. Doesn't mean an attorney's going to show up right now. In Arizona, we have a rule that says as soon as it's reasonably practicable, you get to contact your lawyer. So what that means is, in essence, if the police are in the middle of an investigation and you say, hey, I want to call my lawyer, and they're doing things, that doesn't mean that they get to drop everything and you get to call your lawyer. But if it wouldn't have affected anything, right? You're sitting in the back of the police car or something like that, and you say, I'd like to call my lawyer. They got to give you an opportunity to call your lawyer, who of course is going to tell you, shut the heck up.
Shut up. Where are you? I'll see you in a little while.
You can call me anytime, 24/7, 365, but I will tell you in advance what I'm going to tell you on the phone. I'm going to tell you, don't make any statements. Tell them you want your lawyer, you demand to have your lawyer present before you answer any questions, period.
Period.
Yes.
And then your lawyer will probably meet you down at the jail if they're taking you down there. Or
It depends on the circumstance. Yeah, lawyers aren't first responders.
Right.
Some people want their lawyer to come out to the scene. You don't want that. Your lawyer's not going to be a witness in the case.
No.
We don't want to give the prosecutor a reason to say the lawyer is now a necessary witness in the case. And really all we're going to tell you at the beginning is just shut your mouth. If there's important pieces of evidence that the police don't know about, fine, tell your lawyer, and if it needs to be preserved, we can tell the police, hey, there's evidence over here, we want it preserved, make sure you get the videotape or whatever. But for the most part, officers do a pretty good job at preserving the evidence.
They're good at that. That's their job.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Again, we don't want to make overgeneralized statements. Some cops are bad.
Yeah.
The vast majority of them are good people trying to do the right thing, but not all of them. And we shouldn't assume that they're all good. I mean, we like to say at our firm, we are very, very pro-good cop and very, very anti-bad cop. I think that's a reasonable way to say
I
it.
think that's a reasonable way to live. So I want to be very firm in my in my statement about
Not a jerk.
Not a jerk. So firm is not a jerk. You don't have to say, I'm not talking to you, pig, until I get to talk to my lawyer. That's just going to make him mad, and that's just going to set you up for bad things. Officer, I'm really stressed out. I choose not to answer questions without my attorney present. I'm friends with my, I have an attorney. I need my attorney present for any questioning. And they'll respect that. That is what they're taught to do themselves. Would you suggest that even for not just you as the defender, but maybe your spouse?
Yet, as a defense attorney, I only advise the defendant. I don't advise witnesses because I don't want anybody ever to say that I'm tampering with witnesses. However, the general advice is none of these people ever have to talk to the police. And I can tell you in a circumstance where maybe say we're out in the world, we're hanging out, and something happens and I see you get accused with a crime or something and they ask me about it. If I have something to say that's going to help you, I probably will open my mouth at that point. But I can say that later too.
Sure.
And if you screwed up and I decide I don't want to help the police, I may say I got nothing to say. And unless they send me a subpoena to come to court or testify in front of a grand jury, I'm keeping my mouth shut, and there's no problem with that.
You could pull a Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Well, you have to decide too, not all our laws are right, in my opinion. We've got a bunch of ridiculous victimless crimes out there, and I damn sure aren't going to help the police or anybody else convict someone on a victimless crime. I'm not interested in that. I can't be made to do it, and I'm not going to do it. So, look, we're in charge, right? We're the citizens. The cops, at the end of the day, they're supposed to be our agents.
Yep.
The whole government is supposed to be our agents. So we need to not be jerks, but we need to act like it. We're in charge, and we can make our own decisions about how we're going to conduct our lives. And again, I don't think anyone should be a jerk, but keep in mind, most cops are just trying to do their job. If they got it wrong, and lots of times they do, let us, the lawyers, sort it out in court later.
Right.
At the side of the road, you're dealing with an iron-fisted dictator right there. You should act accordingly.
You're never going to win an argument with a cop when you're detained. You're just not.
No.
I mean, don't try to. Just, okay, let the lawyers figure it out and call it after. But be firm, but be polite. Always be respectful, because that's the way we live as self-defenders. We live a respectful life. But very firmly, I need my attorney present before I answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, you're always going to have a chance to make a statement later.
Right.
I always tell people, look, if you're going to make a statement, let's take a look at all the evidence. Let's see what the witness has got to say. Let you think about it at a time where you're quiet.
Get a
you're not
sleep
stressed.
cycle or two.
Right. I see these people, especially after a shooting. People are freaked out after a shooting. Their hands are going like this. That's a terrible time to be talking to the police about little details that you're trying to remember. There can be misunderstandings. Things can be written down wrong. You might forget something that turns out to be important later. You don't need that aggravation. Take a deep breath. Get through the sort of trauma of the incident, and then later on, you speak with a lawyer, let's regroup. You can always issue a statement later if you like.
And this is, again, last bit here. It's not routine booking questions. If they choose to book you or whatever, what's your name? I refuse to answer questions without an attorney present. That's not what we're talking about. You're going to have to answer those kind of questions. Who's your attorney? I refuse to answer questions without my attorney present. We'd like to know who your attorney is, sir, so that we can get a hold of them and, you can call them. I refuse to answer that question without my attorney present.
You got to be careful, because officers are trained to get you to talk, right? And once they start getting the train rolling, they'll ask you some more questions, and next thing you know, you're talking about the whole incident. So, it's probably better to say, look, here's my license, here's my name, here's where I live, that kind of thing. I'm not making any statements about anything else. And you can always deal with that stuff later.
Amen. Well, be firm, guys. This is something that was news to me, in fact, how firm I have to be. I did not know that before today, that I just thought any kind of invocation was okay. But now I know, and now you know. So, Mark, thank you for that knowledge.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.